What if the monsters we fear weren't hiding in the woods, but sitting on thrones? We grow up hearing stories of dragons and demons, of witches burned and wolves hunted. But some of the real monsters of the medieval world didn't hide in caves. They wore silk robes, held titles, and were praised in churches. History, as it turns out, has a way of covering its tracks, especially when those tracks are soaked in blood. Tonight, you'll hear 4 true stories. Stories of people so cruel, so twisted, they were almost erased from memory. Why? Because they were powerful. Because they were rich. Because the crimes they committed were not the kind history books wanted to remember. We'll look behind castle walls. We'll open doors that were meant to stay shut. And what you'll find on the other side might change how you think about the past. These are not fairy tales. These are cold, hard truths. Truths hidden for hundreds of years. If you stay with me till the end, I'll share something most people don't know about the last monster in our list, a secret buried under centuries of silence. A clue that could change how we see one of the darkest legends of Europe. But first, we begin with a man who fought beside Joan of Arc. A war hero. A noble. A man loved by kings and feared by no one, until children began to vanish from the fields of Brittany. This is the story of Gilles de Rais, and it's far darker than any tale you've been told. He was once called a hero, a brave knight, a man of honor. Gilles de Rais rode into battle beside Joan of Arc, waving the flag of France. People cheered him. Kings trusted him. Poets wrote his name in gold. But behind that shining armor, there was something else. Something hiding. Something hungry. The story begins in 15th century France. The land was broken. War had left villages burned, children orphaned, and fear hanging thick in the air. Out of this chaos rose Gilles, young, rich, and skilled in battle. By the time he was 25, he was one of the most powerful men in the kingdom. He owned massive castles. He threw grand feasts. His clothes sparkled with jewels, and his halls echoed with music. But inside, something had started to rot. It began slowly. Whispers. A missing boy here. A vanished servant there. Nothing certain. Nothing proven. After all, who would dare accuse a nobleman? Who would dare question a war hero? But the truth couldn't stay hidden forever. Gilles de Rais had a secret life. When the doors to his castle closed, the music stopped. The laughter turned to screams. Dozens of children, mostly poor, mostly boys, were lured to his estate with promises of work or food. They never came back. The details are hard to bear. The things he did, the cruelty, the pain, the rituals, were so horrible that even hardened soldiers wept at his trial. Some say he believed he could summon demons. Others say he simply enjoyed the power, the control, the fear in a child's eyes. And yet, no one stopped him. Not at first. For years, his crimes were covered by gold, by silence, by status. People looked away. Priests kept quiet. Neighbors whispered but never spoke out loud. Why? Because Gilles de Rais wasn't just a monster. He was a monster protected by the crown. It wasn't until he ran out of money that cracks began to show. His fortune drained by wild spending and strange alchemy experiments, he began borrowing heavily and growing careless. A few brave families, broken by loss and burning with grief, finally spoke up. They begged the Duke of Brittany to act. In 1440, an investigation began. Slowly, painfully, the truth came out. His servants talked. One by one, they described what they had seen. The hidden rooms. The tools. The bodies. Some were forced to watch. Others helped, too scared to disobey. Gilles was arrested, tried, and found guilty of murder, sodomy, and heresy. But even then, the court handled him with care. He was given a church burial, allowed a confession, treated as a fallen noble, not the monster he truly was. The number of children he murdered? No one knows for sure. Some say 40. Others say over 100. The exact count was never written down. Perhaps that was the point. Even after his death, some tried to clear his name. Books painted him as a victim of political plots. A misunderstood genius. A man wrongly accused. But listen closely to the records, to the tears of mothers, to the words of his own servants, and the picture is clear. He wasn't a victim. He was a predator. A monster hiding in plain sight. So why does history still hesitate to call him what he was? Because evil, when dressed in velvet and armor, is harder to name. And yet, Gilles de Rais was not alone. In another dark corner of Europe, another noblewoman would write her own bloody story, one so cruel, it would give birth to the legend of bathing in blood. But unlike Gilles, her crimes were locked away behind castle doors for far longer. Her name was whispered through generations, wrapped in myth, but the truth might be even more disturbing. Let's step into the world of Elizabeth Báthory, the Blood Countess. They said she was beautiful. They said she never aged. That her skin stayed smooth, her hair dark, her lips red. Even as the years passed, Elizabeth Báthory remained untouched by time. Whispers followed her everywhere. At court, in the market, in the streets outside her castle walls. People said she had found the secret to youth. But what they didn't know was how she found it. Born into one of the most powerful families in Hungary in 1560, Elizabeth had everything: wealth, land, and a name that made even kings nervous. Her cousins were rulers. Her uncles were bishops. She was married off young to a warlord who taught her how to punish disobedient peasants. He showed her how to strike pain without leaving a mark. But when he died, she stopped hiding her cruelty. It started small. A servant girl spilled wine on her dress. Elizabeth slapped her so hard she bled. When the blood touched her skin, Elizabeth paused. Later, she told someone it made her feel refreshed. That one moment turned into something much darker. Soon, her castle halls were filled with the cries of young girls, mostly peasants, some just 10 or 12 years old. They were told they'd be working as maids. They were promised food, safety, and coin. Instead, they walked into a nightmare. Servants said the countess would strip the girls naked, beat them until their skin split, burn their hands with red-hot iron, cut their bodies with scissors, and bite their flesh like a wild animal. Some said she sewed their mouths shut when they screamed. Others claimed she poured freezing water over them and left them outside in the snow. And then, there was the bath. Legend says she believed that blood, fresh, warm, and flowing from a virgin's body, would keep her young, that it would protect her beauty forever. So she began to bathe in it. That's what the stories say. And people believed them. Even the nobility, even the church. Because the number of missing girls kept growing. It wasn't 1 or 10. Some claimed she killed over 600. But here's the strangest part. She got away with it, for years. Why? Because she was a Báthory. Her name was more powerful than law. No judge would accuse her. No guard would arrest her. Parents begged for answers, but no one listened. They were peasants. She was a countess. But power has limits. Eventually, she went too far. She started taking girls from noble families. And that's when the whispers turned into shouts. In 1610, the King of Hungary finally ordered an investigation. Soldiers raided her castle. What they found was beyond words. Dead girls in the halls. Others dying in locked rooms. A body buried beneath the floor. Torture devices scattered through her chambers. And in her private journal, pages of names, victims, written down like a list. She was arrested. But she was never put on trial. Why? Because it would embarrass the royal family. So they made a quiet deal. Elizabeth Báthory was bricked inside her own castle tower. No door. No exit. Just a small slit for food and water. She lived there in silence for 4 years. And then she died. Alone. Forgotten. Sealed away like a secret. To this day, some say the bloodbath was just a legend. That she was framed by greedy men who wanted her land. That her enemies created a monster to take down a powerful woman. Maybe. But too many girls disappeared. Too many witnesses spoke. Too much horror was left behind. And if it was all just a lie, why was she locked away, never to be seen again? Sometimes, legends grow from truth. Sometimes, they are truth. And Elizabeth Báthory, whether victim or villain, remains one of the darkest names in history. But our journey doesn't end here. What if the next monster didn't pretend to be holy, but wore the title of God's chosen? In the heart of the Vatican, one man turned the church into a palace of sin. He was not just a pope. He was a Borgia. Let's enter the gilded corridors of corruption and meet Pope Alexander VI. Power, gold, sin, all wrapped in silk robes and whispered prayers. The Vatican was supposed to be a place of holiness, a house of God, but in the late 15th century, it became something else entirely. A theater of scandal, a web of lies, and at the center of it stood one man, Rodrigo Borgia, who would become Pope Alexander VI. He was not a holy man. He was a Borgia. From the start, Rodrigo played a dangerous game. Born into a powerful Spanish family, he rose through the ranks of the church not by faith, but by force, charm, and money. Lots of it. He bribed cardinals, bought favors, manipulated votes, and in 1492, he took the highest seat in Christendom, the papacy. But what followed was no age of spiritual glory. It was a reign of greed and terror. Rodrigo turned the Vatican into a royal court, filled with mistresses, feasts, and backroom deals. He had children, even though popes were meant to be celibate. One of his sons, Cesare Borgia, became a feared warlord. Another, Juan, disappeared under suspicious circumstances. Rumors said Cesare had him killed. Rodrigo didn't stop them. He used them. Together, the Borgia family ruled like a mafia. They poisoned rivals, staged fake religious ceremonies, stole land and sold church offices to the highest bidder. Rodrigo even hosted wild banquets in the Vatican. One infamous event involved prostitutes dancing naked before cardinals, collecting coins with their mouths. And yet, he claimed to be God's voice on earth. The corruption ran deep, deeper than most dared to speak. Many who stood against him vanished. Records were burned. Wills changed overnight. Opponents were excommunicated or found dead. Some whispered that the Borgias used secret poisons, hidden in rings and hollow keys. Others believed they made deals with the devil himself. Was it superstition, or truth too dangerous to prove? History blurred the lines. And still, Rodrigo Borgia smiled. He painted his own image on church walls, called himself the savior of Rome. He rewrote the rules, and no one stopped him. Because who dares fight the Pope? Even when his sins drowned the city in blood and gold. Eventually, the tide turned. Rodrigo's enemies grew bolder. His own allies betrayed him. And in 1503, he died, suddenly, mysteriously, after a shared meal with his son Cesare. Some say he was poisoned. Others think he drank the wrong wine. Whatever the truth, he died like he lived, surrounded by shadows and secrets. The church tried to move on. They buried him in a quiet tomb, erased his name from records, pretended it never happened. But the stain remained. The papacy was never the same. Trust was broken, faith shaken. And yet, centuries later, many still don't know the full story. Because some monsters don't wear fangs or claws. They wear crosses. They speak blessings. And they hide in plain sight. But not all monsters are protected forever. Some are hunted, dragged from their homes, tortured in front of crowds. And some confess to things no human should ever admit. The next tale takes us deep into Germany, into a quiet village haunted by fear, where children vanished in the woods, and a man named Peter Stumpp claimed he was a werewolf. The villagers said he was cursed, a beast in human skin. But the truth, if there is any truth in this tale, might be even darker. In the late 1500s, the small German town of Bedburg lived in fear. Cattle were found ripped apart. Children disappeared on their way to school. Women went missing in broad daylight. No one saw the killer. No one heard a thing. Only the torn bodies left behind. Whispers spread like smoke. A werewolf, some said. A demon in the forest. The people were terrified. They locked their doors, held their children close. They stopped walking the roads after dark. And still, the killings continued. Then, one night, a group of hunters claimed they saw a wolf in the woods, tall, dark, blood dripping from its jaw. They chased it for miles, cornered it near the river. But when they reached it, the creature vanished. In its place stood a man. His name was Peter Stumpp, a local farmer, a father, quiet, ordinary. No one would have suspected him. Until that moment. The hunters dragged him to the town square. He was tied, beaten, and tortured. And under the weight of pain, Peter confessed, not just to one murder, but to dozens. He told them he had made a pact with the devil. that the devil had given him a magical belt, one that let him transform into a wolf. With it, he said, he became a creature of the night, fast, strong, unstoppable. He described things that made even the most brutal soldiers step back. He claimed to have eaten his own son, to have torn apart pregnant women, to have drunk the blood of children. His words were vivid, detailed, horrifying. But here's the question that haunts historians even now. Did he really do those things? Or was Peter Stumpp just a man caught in the wrong time? A time of fear, superstition, and savage justice? This was the age of witch hunts. People were burned for owning the wrong book, tortured for dreaming strange dreams. Under enough pain, anyone could be made to confess. And Peter was tortured brutally, with red-hot pinches, the rack, and other tools too cruel to describe. Still, the town believed him. They wanted a monster, and now they had one. His execution was one of the most gruesome in recorded history. They tore flesh from his body with burning irons. They broke his bones with a wheel. They cut off his head and burned his body. Even his daughter and his supposed lover were executed alongside him. The entire town came to watch. Children stood on barrels to see over the crowd. Afterward, his remains were nailed to a large wooden wheel, set up in the town square as a warning. A sign above it read, "Peter Stumpp, the werewolf of Bedburg." But here's what's strange. Almost all written records of the event come from a single pamphlet printed in London, filled with errors, rumors, and wild exaggerations. The original German records? Lost or destroyed? It makes you wonder, was Peter a serial killer hiding in plain sight, like Gilles de Rais? Or was he a scapegoat, a victim of a town desperate to kill the fear it couldn't explain? We may never know, but his story lingers, like a shadow, because even centuries later, his name still echoes when people speak of monsters. Not wolves, not demons, but men. And maybe that's the scariest part of all. Because every one of these four figures, Gilles de Rais, Elizabeth Báthory, Pope Alexander VI, and Peter Stumpp, were human. And yet, their actions crossed every line, every boundary. They weren't just cruel. They weren't just violent. They enjoyed it. And more importantly, they nearly got away with it. Now, let's bring it all together. So what do we make of it? These weren't monsters hiding in shadows. They were celebrated, obeyed, even worshipped. They wore crowns, held crosses, sat in castles. And yet behind their power, behind their perfect titles, they committed horrors that shake us even today. They were real. And the scariest part? History tried to erase them. Not because their crimes were small, but because their power was too big. Because remembering them meant admitting that evil doesn't always look like a beast. Sometimes, it looks like a hero, a saint, a king. So now, we ask you, which story disturbed you the most? Do you think they were all guilty? Or were some just caught in the fire of fear and rumor? Share your thoughts in the comments. Let's not let these names vanish again. Let's talk about what history tried to hide, and why. And if this story made you pause, shocked you, or taught you something new, consider subscribing. Because this is just one chapter. There are many more secrets buried in the past. And together, we'll dig them up, one chilling story at a time. If this story made you see history differently, you're not alone. These aren't just tales of the past. They're warnings, lessons, and questions that still echo today. So, if you enjoy uncovering the dark corners of history, the secrets, the shadows, the truth behind the mask, subscribe for more stories like this. And don't forget to like, share, and most of all, comment below. Which of these four figures shocked you the most, and why? Your voice keeps these forgotten stories alive.